Hey everyone, thanks to the people who've left questions on my 200 subs video. I'll get to that as soon as I can, which may be sometime. I can't make any promises. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me about anything, favorite food, politics, whatever, I'll leave the video in the underbar and you can just leave a comment in the comment section. And you know, it's, thanks for playing along. I know that I'm not that fascinating a person, but thank you for pretending to be interested. So this video is going to be about my dog Scoobie, who we euthanized today. And I'm gonna warn you, I've had 2-3 stiff drinks, some not drunk, but kind of intoxicated. Also, it's going to be a video about my dog's death. I'll probably get emotional, and you might think that's hashtag first world problems, and you might not get where I'm coming from at all. That's fine. It's also pretty much unprepared. I'm not making any real point. So you may well, if that doesn't sound appealing to you, which it probably doesn't, then don't waste your time with the rest of it. It's not really meant to be that much of a video that's going to be an excellent video. I'm making it for 2 reasons. The first is for myself, because I want to talk about it like I've been talking about it in my head, not in a crazy person sort of way, but in that kind of way that you talk about it in your head. But it feels good talking out loud. But I'm a little bit introverted, and that tends to click on, especially when when I'm kind of emotional. I tend to kind of not necessarily want to share it with people, because that involves some additional effort, at least share it in an actual conversation. So that's part of why I'm doing it. Obviously, I welcome any comments, but it's just I'm saying that's why I'm talking to the camera. And the second thing is, as a tribute to my dog Scoobie. Scoobie, very original name, right? I know. It's I was quite young when we named her, to my defense. So, but yeah, so that's all. Putting that out there before I even get started. So the reason why Scoobie was quite important to me is she's been with me for more than half my life, 16 years, bit over 16 years. So she was a street dog. We picked her up in Malaysia, and we just set her birthday to be my birthday. So 16 years in a couple of months, give or take. And yeah, so I've touched on this in I guess 1 or 2 other videos, but I moved out of Germany. I'm German. When I was 10, and we spent the next 10 years moving around in Southeast Asia. I was a very shy kid, had terrible trouble making friends. I was really awkward. I was bad at sports. I was like not into pop culture. I was a geek, but this is, first of all, before there was really such a thing as like geek chic, and even given geek chic, I'm the kind of geek that would never fall into that. So when I was at school, I was just simply like so awkward, and I just had a very tough time, and I was very emotional, like to the point I would be the one to often burst out crying or whatever, and you realize with time that you can't do that, and so you change your ways. But I still am a very emotional guy, and I've actually figured out that whilst you can't just go around wearing it on your sleeve because people think you're weird, at the same time you can't just keep it pent up inside, because one of 2 things will happen. Either you'll go pop and explode and be all over the place and have just a breakdown, or you end up going going dead little by little and just caring less and less, and I don't know, it feeds into this kind of ugly cycle of me becoming less, I feel, less human. So I go with it these days. I just try to find the right outlets. And so my dog, Scoobie, she was very important in that I had my family, and that was always the anchor. That was the way I made it, being terrible at making friends and being very lost in the new environment every time we moved every 3 years. Scoobie came to that family, and where my family was hugely important, Scoobie joined our family and played another role. Scoobie, if you go to your siblings or your mother or your father, and you're in a lot of discomfort or pain about something, it can be awkward. You might not want to admit to it, or you might not want to burden them with it. You feel that they won't understand, or that you have to keep up some kind of facade, and that's all not true with a dog. A dog will understand your emotion, so they can help you out and they can make you feel better, but they won't get into any of the more complex stuff, like seeing your personality and seeing your personality aspects of it, I guess, but not the kind of those parts that you're a bit worried about. So she was very important in that sense for me. She was like a real outlet where I could, unconditional love, that kind of thing. And she was a really, really great dog. Street dog. We picked her up at the RSPCA, and she was wily. Like she'd always try to run off and just have an adventure. She'd always come back. We'd be worried sick, and we'd be looking around trying to catch her. But she loved doing that, and she was always a street dog at heart. Always very strong-headed. Always had a mind of her own, and at the same time very caring, and so she helped me a lot. So it's the feelings I have, a lot of it is about the gratitude, which to a dog you can never properly express, obviously. You can tell them thanks, but it doesn't really come across, I guess, unless they're more perceptive than we think. So this is a lot about just me expressing my gratitude to Scoobie for being such an important part of my life. And whilst the dog doesn't necessarily shape your thoughts, because they don't have that much relevant input into the high-minded conversations about politics or ethics, Scoobie helped shape me because she was such a caring being in my life. And I think being cared about is very, very, very important to any human being. You're not going to turn out, I'm not going to say you're not going to turn out well, but you're going to turn out suffering a lot more if you don't have as much care as possible. And Scoobie really did fill a very important role for me there. And I would advise anyone, if you have like a child who is very shy or very withdrawn, something like that, get a dog, or I guess a cat. I'm a dog person, I'm biased, but I think dogs are best. My personal opinion. I know that's a flame topic, but it's an amazing thing for a child to have a dog that cares about them and shows them love when they need it. And don't be worried about the dog getting in some filth or whatever. It's actually very good for the child. It's allergies and all of that stuff. So we need a bit of exposure to the elements now and again. And they do drag in a dead rat or something, but that stops after the first couple of years. I guess the other thing I want to go into slightly is to do with the criticism that one could make of someone making a video or expressing their sadness at the passing of an animal, which is, why are you even talking about this when so many people are suffering and so many people are dying? Why are you making this point about this dog? How selfish are you? Basically, hashtag first world problems. And to some extent, you know, I think on a rational level there's certainly more than an element of truth to that, because I myself am very convinced by Peter Singer and the idea that we should value animals by the quality of their sentience, and so we should value the human animal by that standard. But by that standard, the human animal is actually quite significantly, by what we understand, quite significantly more capable of suffering and mental anguish than most other things, especially anything below primate, from what we can understand. So there really is that special role and that special attention that we should give human beings. So the fact that I can, you know, sit around every day and go 10,000 people and, you know, how many children die a minute or whatever, and I don't mind, but then my dog dies and I get very, very sad. I think that's a valid criticism in a way, but that said, that's to do with our biological machinery. That's to do with the fact that we care about people that we know. If it's just a face with nothing to it, then it actually takes a lot of effort to be able to feel compassion and empathy. We really have to construct a person in that statistic or that empty spot. But to actually experience any kind of suffering, any kind of loss, and I'm very lucky, I have to say this right now, I'm very lucky in my nuclear family, no one's died yet. And no one's sick in any way. So in my nuclear family, my parents and my siblings, we're all healthy, and I haven't lost anyone growing up, which is such a huge blessing for me, and I'm so happy about that. And I guess that's, in a way, why Scoobie's, you know, it's the final lesson that Scoobie taught me, which is how attached I was to her, how much I cared about her as a living, sentient being that was important to me. Given that I haven't lost anyone human, which would be a much greater shock. But I don't want to lose anyone human anytime soon. So in a way, this is, you know, this is a kind of a way to access a certain lesson without going straight to the catastrophe scenario of losing a sibling or a parent. Although Scoobie, you know, kind of my animal sister. But yeah, that kind of suffering, that kind of loss, it does remind me that people experience, you know, that I don't want people I care about to suffer, that I understand that their suffering is bad, like I understood Scoobie's suffering was bad, which is despite the fact, you know, that I really wanted her to stay around, the fact that she probably could have stayed around for another week in terrible pain wasn't a good thing. And the fact that only apply, you know, so given that I feel this way about my dog, a living being, and I'm sorry I'm rambling here, but I keep losing my train of thought. now that I got a bit emotional. But you know, the thing about it is the attention, that love for another living being, because we understand its suffering, because I saw my dog suffer when she was sick. She had cancer, that's what killed her. She had a heart problem where she just kept, she kept falling over and being in very bad pain, and like, making that kind of, that dog pain sound, what's it called in English, yelping, yowling, whatever. So that lets me understand more clearly that it's bad for living beings to suffer. It's a bad thing. And at the same time, it also lets me obviously understand, because I don't feel good about it. I feel sad. Other members of my family feel sad that were around when she was growing up. So that, that shows me on an emotional level that other people are very much affected by people suffering and dying, or by living beings suffering and dying. And given that I feel very upset by the death of a dog, and that my family does, and that I understand that this suffering was quite important, in a real sense. It was a suffering that was, to me, a negative, a bad thing that needed to be gotten rid of somehow. Like, this is not a pro or anti-euthanasia video. I've made my pro-euthanasia video, but I'm just saying, suffering in general, we just need to tackle it somehow. Whether it's euthanasia for voluntary people, or pain medication, or just giving them food, or whatever, we need to tackle it. If that applies to a dog, then obviously it clearly so much more applies to all of the human beings that are suffering terribly. And if I'm ashamed about anything, about my emotions in this, it's not that I care this much about my dog. I'm very happy that I care that much. I was worried that when it actually happened, I would just feel like kind of empty, and like, oh, it's just another day. So that didn't happen. That actually makes me glad. I'm happy that I'm sad about it. The only thing that I guess I would criticize in myself is that I don't feel that way about all of the other suffering in the world. At the same time, imagine if you did, you just go insane immediately. Like, just 1 second's worth of all of the suffering would just, I'm sure it would be enough to drive anyone completely out of their minds immediately. But thinking about those things just reinforces in me how important it is that we do something, that we do more. Because, my dog's a dog, important living being, but still a dog, which her suffering was probably at least one magnitude less, probably more than that, of a human being. And she lived a happy life, and there's so many people suffering out there terribly. They're not living happy lives at all. Their suffering is much greater. And these are people that are losing, people that they love, that haven't grown to ripe old ages. And again, if you think that it's perverse or sick that I'm making this comparison because of a dog, it's not that I'm comparing them to a dog. It's that lets me just understand the suffering a bit more on a personal level, because I haven't been in those situations, and I really honestly, like, as much as I would like to be more motivated to do more things and help more, I still probably wouldn't volunteer to go through that suffering, because it's terrible. But so yeah, even the experience of losing a living being that we care about, that is not human, and that is probably, like, in a semi-objective sense, somewhat less important. It can teach us these valuable lessons, and it can take us out of that normal mode of looking through the news and seeing nothing but numbers and sometimes a flash brief of a face that's grief-stricken, but on TV in 2 dimensions it just looks like an empty mask. But in our own suffering, even if it's just the suffering, the loss of a pet, which is kind of an ugly word, but a companion animal, I think those are the kind of things that it can teach us, and that's what Scoobie's loss has taught me. And for that, but more importantly for all of the time that Scoobie was with me and loved me and cared about me. Thanks, Scoob. Personally, I always keep hope, that there's something after, but I'm an agnostic atheist, so I'm not very optimistic. If it's the case, then, good luck, have fun. If not, then I guess I'm mainly talking to what's left of you up here. But in either case, you were a very valuable friend to me. And that's why I think you were important. No matter what anyone else thinks or, how fine-grained your experience or your consciousness may have been. You were very, very, very important to me. I love you, Scoobie. I'll see you later.